Hello and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me as always is the happy camper herself,
Sarah.
And today we're doing a two-player perspective and accessibility for summer camp. Sarah, tell us a bit about this game.
All right, Summer Camp is a competitive deck building game in which players race to earn merit badges and collect the most experience points to win. Each player has their own deck of cards to play, and as the game progresses, you add new cards to your deck to make it even stronger. There are 7 different merit badge decks, and each game only uses 3. All right, Will, so how does the game change for 2 players?
So for 2 players, the number of badges as well as which badges are used correspond to the number of players. So there is a chart inside the instructions that tell you which ones you're going to need and which ones go back to their respective boxes. Additionally, where each pawn starts on the board, or in the case of a 2-player game, off the board, is also dependent on player count. So like 2 players off the board, 3 players first spot on the board, and further in for a 4-player game.
I think it's just the next spot in.
Yeah,
I thought it was the second
it was
spot
either
in.
2 or 3.
Anyways, you're right.
Something like that.
Okay.
But that's it, and there is no bot.
Nope.
But Nanaman says if you want to check out our opinion, check out our other video, Rolling with Reviews, Summer Camp. Okay, he's done with the spiel.
The spiel. All right. So issues at the 2-player count is it can feel like one player is running away because there are 2 parts to your score. The visual part where you're gaining the merit badges and those have values on them, and the higher values are at the top. So whoever gets to them first gets the higher value. However, cards are worth something, so it is possible.
Points are hidden.
Yes, those points are hidden, but it just feels that way as you're playing the game because you don't know all of what.
Aren't snack points also points?
Yes, they are also.
Snack?
Yeah, snack.
Okay.
I believe so.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can only hold 5 of them.
Right. I feel like they're not worth as much.
True.
Okay. The other issue is so the 3 decks you're using, there's 2 cards face up for each deck.
To buy.
Yeah,
we should say that the game comes with 7 decks.
Yeah.
You'll only use 3 of them, and each of the 3 that you use will correspond to one of the 3 tracks.
Right.
That you're racing along.
Right. So the problem is if you get expensive cards in there, it can be, hard to get enough money to buy a card. So they can just be stagnant. If neither of the 2 players can or want to buy the cards that are there, it just feels the deck building part kind of falls apart a little bit, especially when you get to cards that have player interaction. And if a card presents to you the option of, when you catch up to a player, you get a benefit. It's like, if I'm always ahead on these tracks, then I'm not going to catch up to the other player because the other player's behind me. So there are certain ones that just don't work as well at a 2-player count, which contributes to the 2 cards available for each deck just gets bottlenecked.
Yeah.
And so the decks with more player interaction could be frustrating to play at a 2-player count. But what it does well is you get to your turn faster and you get to play more turns. So
because there's farther for you to go.
Yep.
So it just makes sense. You have to play more.
Yep. That's kind of it for the 2-player experience.
Awesome.
Accessibility. The colors of the pawns are all in a very similar color scale. I mean, yellow, thankfully, is different enough.
But there's a blue and a lavender.
At least I think it's kind of lavender-ish, and the blue is kind of teal. They're very close to each other. And then the red, I think, should be different enough, but then there are people who have red and... Is it red and blue?
Yeah, red and blue.
Red and blue.
And then violet or purple
and red
could be an issue.
I just worry about it. And I mean, I had problems with the difference between the lavender and the blue. They both look kind of like shades of blue to me.
And they all look like campers to me, so.
Yeah. Well, the good news, what we're trying to point out here is you only need 3. So if none of these colors work, like you don't like yellow or whatever, it doesn't work for you, you'll just need 3 pieces.
Go get a rock.
A small rock? But you need 3 small rocks.
3 small rocks. Because it's camping, so it's
Well,
outdoorsy.
that's true. That is thematic.
Look at that.
So think of something thematic that you would find or make at a summer camp, and find 3 of them that are small enough and use them to track your progress across these 3 merit badge tracks.
That's if you have problems with the
That's true.
meeples.
You may not. The snack bar token does have poor contrast because it's red on black. However, it is the only token in the game. So if you're having trouble identifying the icon, well, it's probably the snack bar.
Yeah, and if it's really big, it's probably a player board or game board. Or
Yeah.
one of those things. It's not a snack tile.
Yeah. Icons on the main board can get obscured by the pawns because they're above the spaces. So especially in a 2-player game, at least how we play, we usually are both sitting on the same side of the table facing the board. And so each space, these are very tall meeples.
Yeah.
And so if you have even just 1 or 2, if they're up high enough on the space, because each space has to have room for all 4, you can't see the icon. So a lot of times I just had to remember, look at the icon before moving the token to it, or keep the meeple closest, like on the bottom part of the space, and then you could kind of see the icon.
Yeah.
The tuck boxes, you want to talk about those?
Yeah, so if you're like me and have fat fingers, then you might have an issue trying to get components and cards out of these things because they're rather thin.
Yeah.
And hopefully you don't rip them apart.
Yeah, I think it's a nice concept to keep all the things separate, but the fact that you're putting cards and tokens in them.
Well, it makes setup pretty easy.
Oh yeah, it does.
Because you shuffle the little boxes around, like, okay, which 3 you want? Boom,
Yes.
boom, boom. Okay, let's pull those out and put all the rest away. Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of sense. Just there might be a longevity issue with the tuck boxes.
Right.
But what the game does right, there is high contrast on all the important numbers, words, on all the components. Everything is like white text or black text on the almost complete opposite color background.
I think you caught like one
there was
word.
one.
There was like, for games, the games deck, it
Yes.
had black text on red.
That was the only one that would have a problem. And that's just to identify at the bottom, it says games.
Yeah.
And so when you're separating the cards at the end of the game, that would be somewhat difficult to see for some people.
Right.
I think that's the only issue. The good news being you're using 3 decks. If you hopefully you
It's
can
not a
see,
lot of
well, you can hopefully be able to see the other 2 cards.
Right.
Type.
Yeah.
And so you'd be able to separate out just by, I can't read what this says, so it must be games.
And I think you can also double check to make sure you've separated everything out because every deck will have the same number of cards.
Right. And
Which I believe is 24?
I believe you're right. I feel like it's something like that.
Yes.
But I was also going to say there is a reference for the cards in the rules. So that's the other thing. If you're having trouble separating the cards, the titles of them are all easy to read. So you can always identify them that way.
Right. In fact, we actually learned that we were missing a card
Yes.
because we didn't have the right number. The only problem is the reference doesn't tell you how many copies of
Copies.
each. So that is
Yeah.
just going to be one thing. So make sure you know.
Well, the back of each tuck box
Says the number of
indicates what should be in there, how many cards and how many tokens.
Right. But not how many copies of each
No, it
specific
does
card.
not say that.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to that kind of detail. On the main boards, there's only 3 different icons, and they're fully explained in the rules. So it's very easy to learn. You're either going to move someone forward, gain a snack bar,
Or draw a card.
Draw a card. This is, like you said, really easy to set up. Very well written rules, and you can play open-handed. You can't play any cards on other players' turns. So there's really not much you can do to affect other people. We didn't play with all of the player interaction cards, but it was more about what you were doing in relation to other people.
Yeah.
So I can't say for certain there are no take that elements, but I highly doubt it considering the feeling that I get from this game.
True.
We did not look through all the cards to find out.
Right.
But for what we experienced, since Will can't read his cards, I read it to him and it was no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, conclusion.
For 2 players.
It's fine. I just think it might be better at a 2-player camp.
Especially from what we saw. Because
Yes.
whenever we saw some sort of interaction-based card from a deck, it was like, well, that's going to be much more situational than what it sounds like it would be in a, say, a 4-player game.
Right.
So that's where we're kind of like, it's good, it's easy, it's fun, it's just not probably the best.
Right.
Accessibility.
I would say mostly yes. I think the pawns are probably your worst challenge, and if they're not a challenge, then this game is fine because everything else was really well done.
Yeah. I actually especially like how it gained extra variety because not only do you choose only 3 of the 7 decks, but when you're making up the 3 tracks, you have 9 tiles.
Yes.
And each track is comprised of 3 tiles. Well, those get all mixed up, so each game is not the same from game to game. You
Exactly.
don't know how each track is going to be built out.
Right, because you're going to get benefits on different spaces.
Yes.
So, yeah, agreed. Really good.
So very cool. All right, that'll do it for us. And Sarah,
Yes.
did you ever have any sort of camping experience?
Oh, yeah. Actually, when I was a kid, I went to the same summer camp like 2 years in a row. Really got into photography. Not much else because I have health issues, have had health issues for most of my life. So I couldn't do a lot of the more active,
Right.
like sports and things. But they offered photography, so I learned how to develop photos, take photos. I don't have them anymore, but I have a memory of like some of my favorite pictures ever, like that I took from that summer camp. But I'm kind of sad that I don't have them anymore.
Yeah,
but
you're telling me you were doing like this panoramic
yeah.
series and then also shooting straight up
And,
into the foliage.
And also learning black and white techniques. So I was actually not just doing full color, but learning how to use shades, even though the picture was in color. I mean, what I was looking at was in color. When I developed the photo, it was in black and white. So it was fascinating. I really enjoyed it. It's unfortunately the only part I remember of it.
Well, it's an important part because we still stress on high contrast.
Yes, it's very
And
important.
that's black and white.
What about you? Summer camp?
I did a Sly Park thing when I was in elementary school, which wasn't as many activities.
Yeah.
We had the stage performance, we had hikes, we had just general talks about nature.
Yeah.
It wasn't as activity
Right.
heavy as it sounds like yours was.
Yes.
All right. And that'll do it for us. And why would you ever roll with just one when you can be camping and rolling with 2? If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with 2, that's TWO. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Discord, we have a channel on Tabletop Express. Check the show notes for the invite link.
If you have time, check out the other content Nanaman has found for you, because remember, he's rolling with you.